Senator Al Zaibak.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, chers collègues, I wish to begin by acknowledging with thanks and admiration the work of Senator McFadden, who has championed this legislation with patience, rigor, and genuine conviction. She started this work before I entered this chamber, and I hope to see it carry forward. This bill is as much about the conversation it drives as the change it seeks. And today, I am pleased to add my voice to that conversation. I rise in support of Bill S-222, an act to amend the Canada Elections Act to expand the federal voting age to 16 and 17-year-olds. As a senator, as a Canadian by choice, and as someone who has spent a career building bridges between cultures, between economies, and today, between generations. And to do something that some of my distinguished colleagues may find rather startling, to trust young people more than we currently do. And yet, I believe you will find, as I have, that this is not merely a defensible proposition. It is an overdue one, and I intend to make that case today with evidence, with personal experience, with conviction, and, if you will indulge me, with just enough humor to keep us all awake. As the co-founder of Lifeline Syria, I helped coordinate the private sponsorship and resettlement of thousands of Syrian refugees to Canada. Among the most impressive of those newcomers, the most energized, the most eager to contribute, the most determined to understand and participate in this society were consistently the younger ones. I also came to this country as an immigrant myself. I know that it means to stand. I know what it means to stand at the margins of a governance system, to observe its workings, to be shaped by its decisions, and to possess no formal mechanism by which to participate. The right to vote, when I finally exercised it, was not a bureaucratic formality. It was an act of belonging, of being counted, of being, in the fullest democratic sense, here. This bill, to me, is not merely about a ballot. It's about the vitality of our democracy and the full inclusion of a generation of energized, capable, and deeply affected citizens in the formal processes that will govern their futures far longer than our own. Before I turn to the evidence, I would like to take you on a short journey, one that begins in our own childhoods. Those of us who belong to the baby boomer generation, and I count myself warmly among your distinguished ranks, grew up in a world that by today's standard was technologically, let us say, charmingly modest. Our toys were wooden, plastic, or, if we were particularly fortunate, battery-powered. Our calculators were our fingers, and if the arithmetic grew complicated, we had pencils. I recall with some fondness, and I share this with this chamber in a spirit of full transparency, that the first so-called portable computer I was able to acquire was during my first anniversary summer break away from home. I was 21 years old. It was, in fact, an electrically powered electronic calculator with red light-emitting diodes displaying numbers, a device with the ergonomic grace of a small brick, capable of performing precisely 6 operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, a percentage function, and a square root button. I was thrilled. I used it and carried it everywhere, to the amazement of my classmates and professors alike. I believed not entirely without justification at that time, that I was living in the future. I was not living in the future. I was in 1972. And then there was the computer. Honorable Senators, I had the privilege of attending a fine school of engineering, and that institution was the proud custodian of what was, at the time, considered a magnificent technological achievement, an IBM System 370 mainframe computer that occupied the entire climate control floor of the main university building, an entire floor. A machine of immense physical presence and modest intellectual output, accessed through punch cards, small pieces of cardboard onto which one typed coded instructions, fed them into the machine in careful sequence, and then waited, sometimes for hours. One misplaced character, one card slightly out of order, and the machine would produce a printout of spectacular uselessness, and you would begin again. It happened to me several times. We called this computing. We were very proud of it. I tell you this, not to mock the ingenuity of that era. Those engineers and scientists were brilliant people doing extraordinary work within the constraints of their time. I tell you this because of what it means in contrast to where we stand today. Because the smartphone currently sitting in the pocket of a 16-year-old student in a Canadian high school, a device they have used since early childhood with a casual fluency of breathing, is not merely more powerful than that mainframe. It is incomparably more powerful. We are not talking about a marginal improvement. We are talking about the difference between a birch bark canoe and a nuclear submarine.
Yeah. Wow.
The processing power, the memory, the connectivity, the access to real-time global information, all of it fits in a rectangle the size of a playing card deck. Honorable Senators, I want to dwell on this for a moment because it is not merely a charming generational anecdote. It is a substantive democratic argument. There is a cognitive and informational gulf between what our generation had access to at 16 and what today's 16-year-olds possess. That is, without exaggeration, historically unprecedented. No prior generation in human history has arrived at adolescence with such deep exposure to information, such facility with analytical tools, and such an intuitive grasp of complex interconnected systems. These young people can code, they can edit videos, they can build applications, they manage digital platforms with audience larger than many newspapers. They fact check in real time because they grew up in an environment where misinformation was abundant and critical evaluation was a survival skill. When a political claim appears on their video feed, they do not wait for the morning paper. They open 3 browser tabs, consult 2 databases, and have formed a reasoned opinion before the commercial break. Mm-hmm. And we are seriously asking whether they are ready to vote. With respect, honorable senators, I had a 6-function calculator, and I was considered prepared for adult civic life. Let me now move from the personal to the empirical. As a telecommunication and electrophysics engineer who has spent a career making decisions on facts, I have done my own fact-checking on cognitive development. And what I found reinforces the bill's premise, this bill's premise. As Senator Black astutely observed, We apply no knowledge test to voters of other ages. The question before us is not whether 16-year-olds are perfect reasoners. It is whether they are capable of the deliberate, reflective act of democratic choice. And the answer is yes, they are. On the fiscal side, which as a businessman I take seriously, Statistics Canada reports that 27% of 15 and 16-year-olds are employed nationally. In Quebec, that figure rises to a remarkable 40%. These young workers contribute through sales tax, user fees, motor fuel taxes, and employment insurance premiums, directly funding the social safety net that protects all Canadians. And they have absolutely no voice in how those contributions are allocated. Taxation without representation, honorable senators, is a principle we resolved rather dramatically in the 18th century. I will not belabor the historical parallel, but it remains a reasonably compelling argument. At 16, a Canadian can drive a motor vehicle, requiring judgment, spatial reasoning, and rapid decision-making at 100 kilometers per hour on the Trans-Canada Highway. They can consent to medical treatment, leave school, enter workforce, and pay taxes. In some circumstances, they may be tried as adults. We ask them to bear adult accountability. The least we can do is grant them a voice in the laws that create that accountability. Austria has allowed 16-year-olds to vote in national elections since 2007. Young voters there turned out at higher rates than 18 to 20-year-olds, better informed and more deeply engaged with policy substance. Scotland, Wales, New Zealand, Germany, Argentina, and Ecuador, Brazil. These are serious democracies that looked at the evidence and acted on it. Canada can do the same. Some in this debate suggest that an appointed body ought not initiate changes to the Canada Election Act, that doing so would usurp the power of the people or impose reform from the top down. Well, Section 91 of the Constitution Act 1867 grants the Senate co-equal legislative authority with the House of Commons, except in matters of money bills. Senators of all affiliations have, throughout our history, introduced public bills that became law or shaped policy. We are a chamber of sober second thought, but also, since Confederation, a chamber of initiative. And as Senator Martin recalled, the voting age has changed before, lowered from 21 to 18 in 1970, with relatively limited controversy, reflecting the judgment that democratic thresholds must adapt to changing conditions. We find ourselves again at such a moment. By supporting this bill at second reading, we are not unilaterally changing the law. Every bill requires the support of both chambers. We are opening the door, inviting evidence, expert testimony, and rigorous public discussion. And we would be welcoming young Canadians into institutions that have too often kept them at arm's length. If we can engage our youth in the formal processes of democracy, we cultivate a new generation of leaders. That is not a risk, that is an investment. Honorable colleagues, there is a young person, I am certain of it, watching these proceedings today, perhaps through a school assignment, perhaps because something in the news caught their attention, and they reach for that supercomputer in their pocket, the one that makes the IBM mainframe I studied on look like a paperweight, and found their way here. That young person is informed. That young person has opinions shaped by more information than I had access to at any point in my own education. And that young person has grown up navigating extraordinary complexity with remarkable grace. This bill says to that young person, we see you, We take you seriously. We believe your voice belongs in this democracy, not someday, not eventually, but now. I began today by confessing that I once considered a 6-function calculator the pinnacle of portable technology. I have since updated my understanding of what young minds are capable of. I respectfully suggest it is time for our electoral law to do the same. Lowering the vote.
Senator, I'm sorry, your time for debate is over. Did you want a little bit more time to finish your speech? Est-ce que le consentement est accordé?
Is consent granted?
Lowering the voting age to 16 is not a radical act. It is a generous one. It is a democratic one. And given everything we know about young people, about their world, about the extraordinary tools and minds they bring to it, it is simply, I would argue, the right thing to do. I urge every honorable colleague to support this bill and send it to committee, where experts, scholars, and the young Canadians most affected can be heard. Let us prove that this Senate is a place where the future is welcomed, not feared. Let the process work. Let the evidence speak. And let this generation know that we have not forgotten that this is ultimately their country too. Thank you. Miigwech. Merci. Shukran.